Look, I have been teaching combat methodology at the Vexarin Military Institute for 17 full cycles. 17 cycles of watching cadets stumble through basic strike drills. 17 cycles of fixing bad posture, correcting foot placement, adjusting balance. 17 cycles of asking myself why the Galactic Council keeps assigning me species that probably could not fight their way out of a protein synthesis chamber if their lives depended on it. But this situation with the human, this one was going to be interesting. Not in the way I expected. The human's name was Adrian Hale, just Hale. Not some grand warrior title, not a long, complicated string of sounds with apostrophes and throat clicks like half the species out there use. Just Hale. Plain. Simple. He was standing inside my training hall at exactly 0600 hours, 3 minutes before official class assembly. He wore the standard-issue combat training suit. Somehow, it did not sit right on him. It stretched too tight across his shoulders. It hung loose at the joints. Honestly, everything about humans looked like some kind of biological miscalculation wrapped up in undeserved confidence. His file was open on my data tablet. It glowed with red priority flags. Homeworld, Earth. Gravity, 1.03 standard. Atmosphere, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. And the planet classification, I am not exaggerating, was listed as a Class 9 death world. Class 9. The same category as Crewmath, where sulfuric acid falls from the sky like rain. The same category as Nox Prime, where predators coordinate in packs of 50. I read that classification 3 separate times. I was convinced someone in administration had made a clerical error. Then I looked up from the tablet and saw Hale again. He was standing there calmly, hands resting loosely at his sides, looking over my training equipment with what I can only describe as mild curiosity. This was a being from a Class 9 death world. He looked about as threatening as a pluvian moss farmer. "Instructor Varik," he said. His translator pronounced my name perfectly. "Permission to ask a question?" I already had a bad feeling, but I answered. "Granted." "Why is the gravity set to 0.75 standard? Is there a malfunction?" Oh, this was going to be fun. There was no malfunction. The gravity was intentionally calibrated to accommodate the majority of species in this cohort. My own species, the Vexarins, perform best at 0.8 standard gravity. The Thrin twins in the back required 0.65, or their exoskeletons would lock up from stress. The gravity settings were appropriate for everyone present. Everyone except, apparently, the human who came from a world that, on paper, should not even support complex multicellular life. "The gravity," I said slowly, "is configured for optimal training conditions." "Understood," he replied. He nodded once. Then he began rocking slightly back and forth on his feet, testing the resistance. I watched his leg muscles tighten and release as he adjusted. Most species take several days to acclimate to a gravity shift. This human acted like he was deciding whether he preferred tea or coffee. The rest of the class arrived over the next few minutes. 23 cadets in total, representing 12 separate species. All of them scored high enough on aptitude assessments to qualify for advanced combat instruction. The Thrin twins, Rin and Torv, clicked their mandibles as they studied Hale. 3 Morganthian females gathered close together, whispering in their melodic native tongue. A Quellan male named Selkor made an obvious show of stretching his forearms. Each limb was wrapped in dense natural muscle, shaped by millions of years of evolution in heavy gravity forests. Hale stood alone, hands relaxed, watching everyone. His eyes tracked movement the way targeting systems lock onto threats. Brown eyes, a painfully ordinary color for organs that seemed to process information at a disturbing speed. "Formation!" I barked. 22 cadets snapped into position instantly. Hale followed 0.4 seconds later, slightly slower than the others, but once he found his stance, it was flawless. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight evenly distributed, center of gravity low and stable. Someone had trained this human before he ever set foot in my academy. Today, we begin practical application of Crail's third methodology, I announced as I paced in front of them. You will demonstrate your ability to respond to unexpected aggression with appropriate counterforce. This is not sparring. I let that sink in. This is not exhibition. I stopped in front of them. This is combat assessment. I saw several of them swallow. Good. They should be nervous. Combat assessment meant I would attack without warning, without mercy. They would respond correctly, or they would find themselves in the medical wing explaining to the healers why they failed to block a strike they absolutely should have seen coming. "Selkor," I called out, "center mat." The Quellan stepped forward, his 4 forearms flexed in sequence. I will give him credit. He was strong. His species evolved in dense, high-gravity forests. They swung between massive trees and developed grip strength capable of crushing steel. He took position. I circled him once, twice, letting the tension build. Then I launched a straight punch aimed directly at his thorax. 3 of his arms came up in a defensive weave pattern. The 4th snapped forward in counterattack. Inadequate, not impressive, but acceptable. I deflected his counter and stepped back. 72% efficiency, I told him. Your secondary left arm telegraphed your intent 0.3 seconds before execution. In real combat, you would be compromised. His skin flushed purple with embarrassment, but he nodded and returned to formation. I continued through 6 more cadets. Each one had flaws. ZT relied too heavily on his natural armor plating. One Morganthian displayed excellent form, but hesitated 0.2 seconds before committing to her strike. A Hepnar male named Nexil possessed raw power, but lacked precision. His strikes would drain his energy reserves in less than 1 minute of sustained engagement. Finally, I called Hale to the center mat. He walked forward at that same steady pace. No theatrics, no arrogance, just efficient movement that closed distance without wasted effort. He stopped 3 meters in front of me, and I noticed something. His breathing had not changed, not faster from nerves, not artificially slowed in forced calm, just steady, rhythmic, like his cardiovascular system had been engineered by specialists who understood optimal oxygen transport. I decided to turn this into a lesson, not only for Hale, for the entire class. They needed to understand that a death world classification did not matter. Proper combat technique would always overcome raw biological advantage. I would strike quickly, strike decisively, and demonstrate exactly why 17 cycles of teaching experience made me the superior combatant. I moved without warning, no circling, no build-up like I had given the others. My right hand launched forward toward his throat. It was a strike that had put Morganthian war chiefs flat on their backs, The kind of attack that should have landed before a human brain even realized danger existed, before signals could travel through those long limbs and tell the muscles to react. It should have worked. His left hand rose calmly, turning inward at just the right angle. His fingers closed around my wrist, firm enough to stop my motion completely. He did not block. He did not deflect. He caught it. He caught my strike the way a farmer might pick fruit off a branch. All the force I had driven into that blow simply vanished into him, absorbed as if it had nowhere else to go. And then something strange happened to time. Everything slowed, stretched thin like pulled taffy. While my brain struggled to understand what my nerves were telling me, the human had not moved fast. He had moved exactly right. There is a difference, a very important difference. And suddenly, my 17 cycles of teaching experience felt insufficient to explain what I was seeing. His brown eyes met mine. Something in them made my secondary heart stumble for a beat. It was not aggression. It was not fear. It was curiosity, real curiosity, like he honestly wondered what would happen next. "Instructor Varick," Hale said, his voice steady and perfectly calm. "Has class begun?" The training hall went completely silent. I could hear air moving through the ventilation ducts overhead. 22 cadets stood frozen in formation, every set of eyes, lenses, or sensory organs focused on the center mat where their instructor's attack was currently being held in place by a human who looked mildly inconvenienced at most. I pulled lightly at my wrist, testing. His grip did not tighten, it did not loosen, it simply existed. Absolute, unmoving, like my arm had been locked into industrial machinery, my muscles strained, real resistance built in my joints. The unsettling realization followed immediately afterward. I could not pull free, not without escalating to techniques completely inappropriate for a teaching demonstration. "Release," I said quietly. Hale let go at once and stepped back, resetting his stance. 5 faint pressure marks showed on my wrist where his fingers had been. They were already fading, but there was no doubt they had existed. I rotated the joint carefully. No injury. Still, the memory of that grip lingered like an echo inside my nerves. The class remained silent. At that moment, I had choices. Option 1, admit what had just happened and change my teaching approach immediately. Option 2, pretend everything had gone according to plan and maintain authority over my training hall. I chose option 3. "Again," I said. Hale tilted his head slightly, that same thoughtful look crossing his face. "Instructor?" "That was a preliminary assessment," I said smoothly, lying without hesitation. "Now we evaluate your response during sustained engagement. Defend yourself." I attacked before he could reply. A combination strike, right hand high, left hand low, both aimed at legitimate combat targets. Both delivered at speeds that should have exceeded human reaction capability. Scientific documentation clearly stated that humans possessed slower neural transmission speeds than Vexarins. Their nerve signals traveled longer distances. Their binocular vision system was comparatively primitive. Facts were facts. Except Halo's hands moved faster than those facts allowed. His forearm rose and redirected my right strike upward, using my own momentum against me. At the same time, he pivoted his hips just enough that my left strike cut through empty air. Suddenly, I was off balance, overextended. He had already returned to a neutral stance. I pressed forward, increasing pressure. I unleashed combinations refined across years of instruction and combat training. Hale defended every attack. No dramatic movements, no wasted motion. Just efficient responses that suggested either exceptional training or a species extraordinarily skilled at surviving lethal environments. Considering his world's classification, the second explanation was becoming more believable by the second. His counterattacks appeared without warning, not aggressive, testing. A front kick that would have destroyed my knee if I had not checked it in time. An elbow strike that passed close enough to my auditory senses to create pressure waves. A sweeping motion that nearly removed my footing entirely. We separated at last. Both of us breathing harder now, though Hale's breathing still maintained that steady mechanical rhythm that was beginning to irritate me. Sweat formed on his forehead. Small droplets released by his body for temperature regulation. A primitive cooling system, yes, but clearly effective for prolonged exertion. Adequate defense, I said, controlling my breathing. Your offensive capability requires refinement. Understood, instructor, Hale replied. He gave a slight bow, a cultural gesture from Earth that his translator did not attempt to interpret. Should I return to formation? No. He absolutely should not return to formation. He should remain exactly where he was while I figured out what, in the name of the Galactic Council's founding charter, had just taken place. But 22 cadets were watching me, waiting to see how their instructor would react after being matched by a first-day trainee from an unknown species. Return to formation, I said. We will continue individual assessments. Hale walked back to his place. As he passed, several cadets subtly leaned away from him. Rin and Torv had stopped clicking their mandibles entirely. The Morganthian females were no longer whispering. Even Selkor, with all 4 powerful arms, watched the human with something new in his expression. Respect, or possibly fear. I was beginning to suspect those two emotions were closely related when humans were involved. I continued the evaluations, working through the remaining cadets. Half of my attention stayed on instruction. The other half kept returning to the memory of those 5 pressure marks on my wrist. Hale stood quietly in formation, hands relaxed, observing every demonstration with that same calm curiosity, learning, analyzing, processing. Class ended at 0730 hours. I dismissed the cadets and instructed them to review Varrick's third methodology before the next session. They left in small groups, speaking quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing back toward Hale. He packed his equipment calmly, apparently unaware of the attention focused on him. "Cadet Hale," I called before he reached the exit. He stopped, turned, walked back toward me. "Yes?" "Instructor, about your question," Hale said. "My previous combat training?" "Yes," I said. "Where did you receive it? On Earth?" "Yes, sir. Mandatory service begins at 18 standard years. I completed advanced infantry qualification before earning my commission." I repeated the phrase quietly to myself. Advanced infantry. The words felt heavier the more I thought about them. "And what exactly does that involve?" I asked. "On a Class 9 death world?" Hale paused for a moment, considering the question with that same calm patience that was already starting to test my nerves. "Survival training in hostile environments," he said. "Close quarters combat, weapons proficiency, strategic and tactical analysis. Standard curriculum." "Standard. He described training that allowed him to stop my full-force strike as if it were ordinary classroom material. "And how long does this standard curriculum last?" 16 weeks for basic training, 20 weeks for advanced qualification. After that, 2 years of field deployment before I became eligible to apply for off-world academy placement. I ran the numbers quickly in my head. According to his file, Hale was 24 standard years old, which meant he had been preparing for combat since barely reaching adulthood by human standards. Training under conditions that would likely kill most species I had ever encountered, facing threats I could not even properly imagine. "Dismissed," I said. He nodded once and left without another word. Even in reduced gravity, his footsteps were quiet. I stood alone in the gymnasium, staring down at my wrist while slowly rotating the joint. The pressure marks were gone now, completely faded. But I could still feel them. I could still remember the certainty in his grip, the calm control that suggested he had been holding back during our entire exchange. My data tablet chimed. Incoming message from Academy Administration requesting my preliminary evaluation of the new human cadet. I watched the notification blink for a long moment before beginning my response. This semester was going to be interesting. I did not sleep well that night. That fact deserves explanation, because Vexarins normally possess excellent sleep cycles. An evolutionary advantage from our predator ancestry allows us to rest efficiently between periods of activity. Instead, I spent 6 hours staring at the ceiling panels, replaying the moment Hale caught my strike. Over and over, I analyzed biomechanics, reaction timing, muscle engagement, neural response speeds. I tried to understand how a species officially documented as having slower neural transmission had reacted faster than my own perception. Around the 3rd hour, I turned to the Academy database. Humans became my obsession. I accessed every file our intelligence services had collected. There was not much. Earth had made official contact with the Galactic Council only 8 standard years earlier. Humanity was still considered probationary members. Most available information came from early surveys and a small number of humans traveling off-world for trade or education. But the notes that did exist were concerning. One medical report from a Pluvian physician described treating a human construction worker. The doctor wrote, "Patient required minor surgery following a compound fracture. Patient remained conscious and conversational during procedure. Declined anesthetic. Reported pain level manageable compared to previous incident referred to as a motorcycle accident. I do not understand this species." I read that entry twice. Then I opened a xenobiology study examining human muscle composition. Humans possessed unusually high percentages of what researchers called fast-twitch muscle fibers, compared to most spacefaring species. These fibers allowed rapid bursts of explosive power. The researcher theorized this adaptation evolved for pursuit hunting, predation, and accurate throwing of weapons. Throwing weapons. They evolved to kill by throwing rocks hard enough to cause lethal trauma. Another report came from a deeply confused Morganthian anthropologist conducting cultural analysis. The report stated, humans participate in voluntary combat for recreation. Activity is called sports. Participants strike one another repeatedly, while spectators observe and celebrate. When questioned regarding purpose, humans responded, "It builds character." I remain uncertain What form of character results from repeated cranial impact? I read until my eyes burned. Then I kept reading. Every file described the same pattern. Humans were resilient, aggressive, adaptable, and they treated pain not as something to avoid, but as a method of learning. Their military history was even more unsettling. For thousands of years, they had fought each other continuously, refining weapons, tactics, and strategy through constant conflict. Compared to them, the wars of my own species looked like minor territorial disputes, and we had welcomed them into the Galactic Council. We had looked at a species of persistent predators from a death world and said, "Yes, please join civilized society." The absurdity almost made me laugh. Morning formation at 0600 hours found me back in the gymnasium. Cadets entered one by one. Hale arrived exactly 3 minutes early again and took the same position as the previous day. He nodded politely toward the Thrin twins, who now gave him noticeably more personal space. Information had spread. Of course it had. 22 witnesses had seen an instructor matched by a first-day cadet. Gossip like that travels faster than light through academy dormitories. I could see it in the way cadets watched him. I could hear it in conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. "Formation," I called. They snapped to attention. Well, 22 of them snapped immediately. Hale moved into position with efficient precision, no wasted effort, no exaggerated discipline, just direct practical motion from one posture to another. "Today, we advance to Varick's fourth methodology," I announced, "sparring with graduated resistance. You will pair by weight class and apply yesterday's lessons. I will observe and provide corrections." I intentionally did not assign Hale a partner. Not yet. I wanted to observe him interacting with others first. I needed to see how he adapted against different species with different physical advantages. Also, and I was not ready to admit this even to myself, I needed time to develop a strategy for our inevitable second encounter. The Thrin twins paired together, logical, given their shared exoskeletal structure. Selkor partnered with a Morganthian female named Ares, his 4 powerful arms balanced against her reach and flexibility. The rest formed reasonable matchups, leaving Hale standing alone on the mat. "Cadet Hale," I said, "you will observe this round." "Observe carefully," I told him. "Pay attention to the techniques each pair uses." "Yes, instructor," Hale answered. He stepped over to the observation area, and I swear I could feel the tension drain out of several cadets at once. A few of them had clearly been worried they might have to spar with him. Smart reaction. They were learning already. The matches began. I moved between pairs, correcting posture, adjusting angles, offering guidance where needed. Vor still depended too heavily on his natural armor plating instead of proper defense. Eris's timing had improved since yesterday, but her recovery between movements remained slow. A Hepnar female named Kale showed strong aggression, but her targeting choices were inefficient and left her exposed. Meanwhile, Hale watched everything. Those eyes of his followed each exchange like tracking sensors. His head turned slightly from fight to fight, studying multiple engagements at once. Twice, I caught him quietly mouthing the same corrections I gave aloud to other cadets. He was memorizing, sorting information, saving it for later use. Intelligent. The academy files had not emphasized that aspect enough. Or maybe they had, and I had been too distracted by the words Class 9 Death World to notice. "Rotation," I called after 15 minutes. "Switch partners." The cadets rearranged themselves across the mat. That was when I made my decision. "Cadet Selkor," I said, "you will partner with Cadet Hale this round." Selkor's skin shifted to that familiar shade of embarrassed purple, but he stepped forward without complaint. Hale joined him. They bowed to each other in the traditional acknowledgment before sparring. Selkor stood an entire head taller than Hale. He outweighed him by at least 40 kilograms and possessed twice the number of striking limbs. On paper, this should not have been competitive. "Begin!" Selkor attacked immediately, launching his standard combination. All four arms moved in coordinated rhythm, creating overlapping attack zones that were nearly impossible to defend. Nearly. Hale slipped left, ducked beneath a high strike, redirected another using his forearm, and somehow threaded himself through the tiny gap between attacks. He delivered a sharp kick to Selkor's leading leg. Selkor stumbled. His coordination faltered for a split second. Hale advanced instantly, throwing controlled hand strikes that forced all four of Selkor's arms into defensive positions. They exchanged attacks for roughly 30 seconds. 4 limbs against efficiency, raw advantage versus precision. And then I noticed something remarkable. Hale was learning in real time. While fighting, he analyzed Selkor's movement patterns. He identified the same 0.3-second telegraph I had pointed out the previous day and began timing counters around it. By 45 seconds, Hale was landing 2 strikes for everyone he received. Selkor's skin darkened from purple to nearly violet. "Halt," I called. They separated, both breathing hard. Selkor looked frustrated. Hale looked thoughtful. "Cadet Hale," I said, "your assessment." "Cadet Selkor demonstrates strong coordination across all 4 limbs," Hale replied calmly. "However, his secondary left arm initiates each combination approximately 0.3 seconds before the others. Once identified, the pattern allowed predictive countering." The entire gym fell silent. Every cadet had stopped sparring to listen. I had pointed out that exact weakness yesterday. Hale had remembered it and turned it into an advantage in less than a minute of combat. "Cadet Selkor," I said, "your assessment?" Selkor worked his jaw, mandibles clicking softly. "The human reacts faster than expected, instructor. Recorded data states his species possesses slower neural transmission speeds, yet his response time contradicts this." "Adrenaline response," Hale said quietly. I turned toward him. "Explain." "Human adrenal glands release a hormonal mixture during stress," he said. "It increases reaction speed, pain tolerance, and physical strength. Effects are temporary but significant." "You are experiencing this response now?" "Yes, instructor, since the sparring began." "And you retain cognitive clarity during this state?" "Yes. Physical performance increases without substantial impairment to judgment. It is a normal combat response for humans." "A normal combat response?" "Humans carried an automatic performance enhancement system that activated during danger." I did not possess adequate vocabulary to describe how unfair that sounded. We rotated partners again and again. I paired Hale against opponents with entirely different advantages. Against Cax, he adapted to exoskeletal armor by targeting joints and structural weak points. Against Eris, he compensated for her reach using superior footwork and positioning angles. Against Kale, he absorbed her aggressive assaults and struck precisely during recovery gaps. he won every exchange. Not through overwhelming strength, not through superior biology, through observation, through adaptation. Each opponent taught him something, and he applied the lesson immediately in the next match. By the end of class, most cadets were exhausted. Hale was sweating heavily now, his training suit darkened with moisture, but his breathing remained steady and controlled. His stance never collapsed. "Dismissed," I told the class. "Review Varick's fourth methodology tonight. Tomorrow, we begin weapons familiarization." The cadets left in small groups again. This time, they gave Hale even more space. He had transformed from unknown newcomer into confirmed threat within a single training session. I saw respect in their expressions, respect and caution. They were beginning to understand what I had realized yesterday. Humans were dangerous. "Cadet Hale, remain." He stopped at the exit, turned, and walked back toward me with that same calm, unhurried pace. "Yes, instructor?" I gestured toward the center mat. He followed without hesitation, stopping 3 meters away. We stood there quietly for a moment, instructor and student, Vexarin and human, both of us aware of what was coming next. "Your performance today was exceptional," I said. "Thank you, instructor." "But you restrained yourself against every opponent." His face stayed neutral, but something shifted behind those brown eyes. Recognition, maybe. Respect for the observation. "I did not wish to injure my classmates," he said. "This is training, not combat." "And yesterday," I continued, "when you caught my strike?" "That was reflex, instructor," he answered. "You attacked without warning. My body reacted before conscious control could limit the response. Reflex." He had neutralized an instructor-level attack through instinct alone. I remembered the reports I had read the previous night. The studies about pursuit predators, about throwing weapons, about thousands of years of increasingly efficient violence shaping an entire species. And suddenly, everything made a little more sense. "Show me," I said. Hale looked at me, waiting. "Instructor?" he asked. "I want to see what you can really do," I continued. "No restraint, no controlled reactions, no worrying about injury, just combat." He studied me for a long moment. I could practically see the thinking happening behind his eyes. Risk calculation, outcome prediction, the mindset of a trained soldier measuring consequences before acting. Finally, he spoke. "Instructor Varick," he said carefully, "I appreciate the opportunity, but I do not believe that would be appropriate inside a training environment. I am giving you a direct order, Cadet." "With respect, sir, no." The refusal hung between us. Technically, it was insubordination, grounds for discipline, but it was also judgment. The kind that comes from knowing exactly how much damage you are capable of causing and choosing not to cause it. Something shifted in how I saw him right then. He was not simply dangerous. He was controlled, disciplined, fully aware of his own abilities and willing to restrain them even when granted permission not to. That realization made him far more dangerous, not less. "Then we continue as yesterday," I said. "Gradual escalation, I attack, you defend, we determine limits together." "Yes, instructor." I launched the same opening attack as before, the throat strike that had defeated Morganthian war chiefs. His left hand rose instantly, caught my wrist, held it still, but this time I was prepared. I pivoted my body, using the trapped arm as leverage, and drove my left elbow toward his temple. Hale released immediately, ducked beneath the strike, and delivered a palm strike to my solar plexus. Air exploded from my lungs. The blow was controlled, precise enough to prove capability, restrained enough to avoid injury. We reset positions. I attacked again. Combinations. Feints. Real techniques meant to overload defensive processing. He handled everything. Sometimes he blocked. Sometimes he redirected. Sometimes he countered with strikes that stopped mere millimeters from impact. Teaching strikes. He was showing me openings without exploiting them. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. My muscles burned. My breathing grew heavy. Sweat soaked through my uniform and clung to my carapace. Hale showed fatigue as well. His body's moisture-based cooling system worked constantly now. Sweat visible across his face and clothing, yet his stance never collapsed. His defense never broke. Finally, I stepped back and raised my hands in the universal signal to stop. Enough. We stood there breathing hard. That was when I noticed it. Hale was smiling, not broadly, just a small lift at the corners of his mouth. Enjoyment. You are smiling, I said. My apologies, instructor, he replied. It has been a long time since I had a proper training partner. I appreciate the opportunity. A proper training partner. He considered me, a decorated combat instructor with 17 training cycles of experience, a proper training partner. I should have been offended. Instead, I felt strangely satisfied. Your technique is exceptional, I admitted. Where did you receive advanced training? Earth, sir. But I continued studying after my commission. Humans have developed hundreds of martial systems across thousands of years. I have trained in 7 different styles, attempting to combine the most effective elements of each. 7 systems. Thousands of years of refinement. Humans had been studying combat like an art form long before most galactic council species achieved spaceflight. These systems, I asked, are they widely known on your world? Yes, instructor. Many humans study martial arts recreationally. Some schools have taught the same methods for more than 1,000 years, passing knowledge directly from teacher to student without interruption. Recreational combat training, millennia-old teaching traditions, continuous chains of accumulated fighting knowledge. And this was the species we had welcomed into the Galactic Council. I remembered the reports again, the motorcycle accidents, the sports injuries, the strange human belief that hardship somehow built character. Then I looked at Hale, patient, respectful, capable of extreme violence, yet governed by discipline. Dismissed, Cadet Hale, I said. Excellent work today. Thank you, instructor. He bowed again, collected his equipment, and left the gymnasium. For the 2nd day in a row, I stood alone on the training floor, rotating my wrist, even though there were no marks this time. Tomorrow, we would begin weapons familiarization. Tomorrow, I would see what a human could accomplish when given tools designed specifically to extend lethal capability. I realized I was genuinely looking forward to it. And that realization told me more than anything else how much this human had already changed my understanding of combat instruction. In only 2 days, Hale had gone from unknown variable to the most fascinating teaching challenge I had encountered in 17 cycles. My data tablet chimed again. Administration requesting an updated assessment. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I typed 7 words. Request human combat methodology be added to curriculum. I sent the message before I could reconsider. I imagined the confusion it would cause, but I had seen enough. Hale was not an anomaly. He was an example. If one human could perform like this, what could an entire unit accomplish? What could an entire species achieve? The Galactic Council had no idea what they had invited into their ranks. But I was beginning to understand, and honestly, I could not wait for tomorrow's class.